The old cargo bay was silent. Dust floated in the air, and broken lights flickered on the ceiling. Empty crates lay scattered across the floor. It was the kind of place where no one came anymore. But in the far corner something moved. A large sack tied with rough rope shifted slightly. From inside came the sound of weak breathing, slow and painful. The sack trembled as if someone trapped inside was fighting to stay alive. 2 alien traders stood near the door. Their tall, thin bodies were covered with gray scales. Their yellow eyes glowed faintly as they whispered to each other. "She is weak," one said in a cold voice. "Not worth the trouble." "Leave her." The second alien gave a short laugh. "Yes, she will die soon. Better this way." Without another word, they turned and walked out. The heavy door slammed shut behind them. Silence returned to the cargo bay. Only the sack remained, lying forgotten in the shadows. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then from deep inside the sack came a sound. A small, trembling voice. It was not the voice of a grown alien, but of a child. "Mom." The single word echoed in the empty room. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but it carried weight. It did not sound alien. It sounded human. At that exact moment, a man was passing by the old cargo bay. His name was Ethan. He was a scavenger, always searching through abandoned places for things he could sell. His clothes were old, his boots covered with dust, and his face carried the marks of a hard life. He had learned to trust silence, to avoid trouble, and to keep moving. But when Ethan heard that tiny voice, he froze. "Mom?" He looked around. The sound was faint but clear. His heart began to beat faster. Slowly, he pushed the old door open. The rusty hinges groaned loudly. The smell of metal and rot filled his nose as he stepped inside. His eyes scanned the shadows. At first, he saw nothing. Then he noticed the sack in the corner. It moved. Ethan narrowed his eyes. His first thought was danger. Many times he had seen traps set to lure scavengers, but then the sound came again, so soft it almost broke his heart. "Mom." This time the voice cracked like a child crying in the dark. Ethan took a slow step forward. His boots scraped against the floor. The sack jerked slightly as if whoever was inside had heard him. He crouched down beside it. His rough hands touched the rope. For a second he hesitated. Opening it could bring trouble. The traders who left it here might come back, but something inside him refused to walk away. Carefully he untied the rope. The knot was tight, but after a moment it loosened. Ethan pulled the sack open. Inside lay a small figure. A child. Her skin glowed faintly under the broken light. It was pale, almost silver. Thin blue veins shimmered across her arms. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing a strange, shining silver color that did not look human at all. She looked weak, starving, and close to death. The child stared up at him. Her lips trembled, and then she spoke again. "Mom." The word was clear. Perfect human. Ethan's chest tightened. He had lost his wife years ago. That word was something he had not heard in so long, and hearing it now from the mouth of an alien child made his heart ache. But more than that, it made him afraid. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice low. The girl did not answer. She only reached out with a trembling hand, her small fingers trying to grab his sleeve. Ethan looked around the empty cargo bay. He could almost hear the traders' voices in his head. "She is weak. Leave her. Not worth the trouble." He clenched his jaw. Whatever this child was, she had been abandoned to die like garbage. And yet she had spoken a human word, a word full of meaning. "Mom," she whispered again, weaker this time as her eyes began to close. Ethan's heart raced. He had 2 choices. He could walk away and pretend he had never heard the voice. Or he could take her with him, knowing that danger would surely follow. He looked at her small, fragile body, the glow of her skin, the way her hand held onto him, desperate for help. And Ethan made his choice. He wrapped the sack around her like a blanket, lifted her into his arms, and held her close. "All right, kid," he muttered. "I don't know who you are, or why you can speak that word, but you're not dying here." He turned and walked toward the door, his boots heavy on the floor. The silence of the cargo bay returned behind him. But somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes were watching, and the hunters who had left the child behind would soon realize she was missing. Ethan carried the strange child out of the cargo bay and into the dim streets of the old spaceport. Broken lights buzzed above, and far in the distance, heavy machines rumbled like giants waking from sleep. The place was dying, just like everything else on this forgotten world. The child was light in his arms, far too light for someone her age. It felt like he was carrying nothing but bones and fragile skin. She shivered. Even though the night air was warm, Ethan pulled the sack tighter around her. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Her silver eyes blinked slowly, glowing faintly in the darkness. She looked at him as if she was trying to read his face, searching for something familiar. Then, in a weak voice, she whispered again. "Mom," the word made his chest hurt. He turned his head away. "I'm not your mom, kid," he muttered. "I'm not even close," but her gaze did not change. She looked at him with the kind of trust only a child could give. It was almost worse than fear. Fear, he understood. Trust? Trust was dangerous. Ethan knew he couldn't stay in the open. The aliens who left her behind would return sooner or later. They were traitors, smugglers, killers, whatever they needed to be to survive. And they hated leaving loose ends. He slipped into a narrow alley, his boots crunching over broken glass. Rats scattered into the shadows. The smell of oil and smoke hung in the air. Finally, he reached his hideout. It was nothing more than a small metal room built inside the skeleton of an old cargo ship. The walls were dented, the floor cracked, but it was hidden and safe, for now. Ethan placed the child on a makeshift bed made of blankets and old cloth. She lay still, her chest rising and falling slowly. Up close, she looked even stranger. Her skin was pale, but not human pale. It shimmered faintly like silver dust under the light. Thin blue veins glowed under her skin, tracing patterns across her arms. Her hair was white, though she was clearly a child. And her eyes looked like small pieces of a broken star. Ethan shook his head. He had seen many species in his years, but nothing like her. He reached into his bag and pulled out a water canister. He held it to her lips. At first she did not move, but then she drank, small sips at a time. Her tiny hands trembled as they gripped the container. When she finished, she whispered again. This time it wasn't the same word. Lyra. Ethan leaned closer. "What did you say?" The girl's lips parted. "Lyra," she repeated softly, her voice shaking. "My name, Lyra." Ethan sat back, staring at her. At least she could speak more than one word. And she had a name. Lyra. But something else bothered him. She had spoken mom in perfect human language. Not broken, not strange, perfect. Yet now her voice carried an accent, like she was forcing herself to shape the sounds. Ethan rubbed his forehead. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly lifted a trembling hand and touched his chest. Her fingers pressed against the old scars under his shirt. For a moment, Ethan felt something strange, like a spark inside his mind. Images flashed quickly, too fast to understand. A memory of his wife smiling. A memory of her voice calling his name. A memory of holding her hand before she died. Ethan jerked back, breaking the contact. His heart pounded. What the hell was that? Lyra's silver eyes shimmered with tears. She whispered one word. "Sorry." Ethan stared at her. His mouth went dry. She wasn't just a child. She had touched his memories. She had seen things no one else should ever see, and yet she looked so fragile, so small. He sighed heavily and sat down on the floor beside the bed. "Your trouble, kid. Big trouble." Outside, the night grew louder. Somewhere in the distance, engines roared. A ship was landing. Voices echoed in the streets. The traitors were back. Ethan felt his stomach twist. They would search. They would ask questions. And if they found her, they wouldn't just kill her. They would kill him too, just for touching her. He stood quickly and began packing a few supplies into a bag. Lyra watched him silently, her eyes following his every move. "You don't understand," Ethan said as he threw a blanket over her small frame. "If they find you here, we're both dead." She tilted her head, confused. Then she whispered again, her voice soft but certain. "They come?" For me, Ethan froze. Her words were broken, but the meaning was clear. She knew they were coming. Maybe she could even feel it. He cursed under his breath. "How do you know that?" But she did not answer. She only closed her eyes as if she were listening to something far away, something no one else could hear. Then she opened them again and said one more word. "Run." The night outside was no longer quiet. Engines growled in the distance and heavy boots struck the ground in rhythm. The traitors were back and they were not alone. Ethan could hear more voices this time, sharper, angrier. He pulled the strap of his old bag across his shoulder and tightened it. His eyes darted around the small hideout, searching for anything he might have missed. His heart beat fast, but his hands stayed steady. Panic was dangerous. On the bed, the alien child, Lyra, sat upright now, her silver eyes wide. She didn't look afraid. She looked aware, like she could sense every sound, every presence moving outside. "They look," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "They look?" "For me." Ethan crouched beside her. "Then we don't give them what they want. Can you walk?" She nodded weakly, though her legs trembled when she stood. Ethan steadied her with one hand. She felt too light, like a shadow about to vanish in the wind. "Stay close," he said. "Don't make a sound." They slipped out the back of the hideout into a narrow passageway. The air smelled of rust and burned oil. Pipes hissed overhead. In the distance, harsh lights cut across the streets, moving like search beams. Ethan pulled Lyra into the shadows as two traders marched past. Their yellow eyes glowed in the dark, scanning every corner. "She couldn't have gone far," one hissed. "Find her." "The child must not survive." Ethan's jaw tightened. His instinct screamed at him to run the other way, but Lyra gripped his hand tightly. For someone so weak, her hold was strong, almost desperate. They moved again, sliding through broken doorways and crumbling walls. Each step felt heavier than the last. Every sound, every creak of metal, every drip of water made Ethan's muscles tense. Finally, they reached the edge of the old market district. The place was a graveyard of empty stalls and shattered glass. Once it had been filled with voices, colors, and trade. Now it was nothing but ruins. Ethan guided Lyra behind a collapsed stand. They crouched low as a patrol of 3 aliens swept past. Their weapons glowed with a faint blue light. "They know this place," Ethan muttered. "They're hunting like wolves." Lyra's eyes closed suddenly. She held his hand tighter. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Left, safe." "Not right," Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "Left safe," she repeated, her eyes still shut. "Not right." He looked at the crossroads ahead. The right path seemed clearer. The left path was darker, filled with broken debris and fallen beams. But something in her voice. It wasn't guesswork. It was certainty. Ethan made his choice. Left it is. They crawled through the wreckage, climbing over metal beams and slipping through tight spaces. The noise of the search grew fainter, but it didn't vanish. The hunters were clever. They spread wide, covering ground quickly. At one point, Lyra stumbled. Ethan caught her before she fell. She leaned against him, her breath shallow. "Why do they want you dead?" he asked quietly. Her lips moved slowly, forming words with effort. "Because—" "I see, I hear. I know." Ethan's skin prickled. "You knew they would come. You knew which way to go. You can sense them, can't you?" She didn't answer. Her eyes shimmered with sadness, as if she already understood too much for someone so young. Before Ethan could press her further, a sharp sound cut the air, a whistle followed by the crack of boots slamming the ground. The hunters had picked up their trail. "Move!" Ethan hissed. They darted through the ruins. Lyra's small legs struggled to keep up, but Ethan lifted her into his arms again. His lungs burned as he ran, weaving through the maze of broken buildings. A beam of blue light swept past them, scorching the wall. The hunters shouted behind them. Ethan dove into another alley, pressing his back against the wall. His heart pounded in his ears. He peeked around the corner. 3 aliens were closing in fast. Lyra pressed her forehead against his chest. "Hide," she whispered. "There's nowhere to hide," Ethan muttered. But before he could finish, Lyra lifted her small hand. The air shimmered. A faint wave rippled outward like heat rising from the ground. For a moment, the alley seemed to fold around them, shadows growing deeper, darker. The aliens rushed past the opening, their glowing eyes sweeping the area. But they didn't see Ethan or Lyra. They kept running. Ethan stared down at her. "What did you just do?" Her eyes fluttered open weakly. "I made us. Gone." Then she collapsed against him, drained. Ethan held her tightly, his mind racing. She wasn't just different. She was powerful. And if the traitors feared her, it meant she was more important than he had guessed. The danger was greater now. He wasn't just running with a child. He was carrying a secret that could shake entire worlds. In the silence that followed, Ethan whispered to himself, "What have I gotten into?" Far behind them, the sound of angry voices grew louder. The hunt was not over. It had only just begun. The night was quiet again, but Ethan knew silence did not mean safety. He carried Lyra through the ruins until his arms ached. Finally, he found a half-collapsed building with its roof still holding. It was dark, hidden from the main streets, and the entrance was narrow enough to block with debris. He laid Lyra gently on the ground, using his coat as a blanket. She was breathing, but her skin glowed faintly, like moonlight trapped under her flesh. Ethan crouched beside her, his face grim. "You should have been dead," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "They wanted you gone. And yet here you are." Her silver eyes opened slowly. Even weak, they still held a strange light, a depth that unsettled him. She whispered, "You saved me." Ethan sat back against the wall, shaking his head. "Don't thank me yet. You don't know what you've dragged me into." For a moment, they sat in silence. The wind whistled through cracks in the walls. Rats scurried across broken stone. Lyra turned her head toward him. "You are not afraid?" she asked softly. Ethan gave a short, rough laugh. "Kid, I've seen things most people would never believe. Fear's always there, but you're not what scares me." Her eyes blinked slowly. "Then what scares you?" He stared at the ceiling, thinking. "Losing people," he said finally. His voice dropped low, heavy with memory. "I lost someone before. Someone who called me family. I don't want to feel that again." Lyra tilted her head, studying him like she was peering into his soul. Then she whispered a single word. "Wife." Ethan's whole body tensed. His eyes shot to hers. "What did you say?" "Wife," she repeated. Her small hand reached toward him, trembling. When her fingers brushed his arm, Ethan's mind filled with flashes. His wife's laughter, the smell of her hair, the sound of her voice. He jerked back, his chest tight. "Stop that. Don't ever do that again." Lyra pulled her hand back, her eyes wide with guilt. "Sorry." Ethan's breath came hard. He pressed his fists against his knees. "You're not just some lost kid. You're in my head. You saw her." She looked down. "I did not mean it comes without asking." He studied her, breathing heavily, then sighed. "You can see memories. That's why they fear you, isn't it?" Lyra nodded weakly. "They say, I am broken. Too much human." Ethan frowned. "Human?" Her eyes lifted again, shimmering like liquid silver. "Part of me is human. Part is not. That is why they left me. I do not belong." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He stared at her fragile form, wrapped in his old coat, shivering not from cold but from rejection. She had been thrown away for what she was, a child caught between two worlds, and yet she had clung to him. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "Why call me Mom?" Lyra's lips trembled. "Because when I look inside you, I see light. I see care. Like a mother. Like family." Not same word, but closest. Ethan's chest tightened again. He wanted to push her away, to tell her she was wrong, that he wasn't that man anymore. But he couldn't. Not when she looked at him like that, with trust, with hope. He rubbed his face with both hands. "Kid, you're more dangerous than you realize. If you can touch minds, if you're half human, people will want you dead. Or worse, they'll want to use you." Her voice shook. "But you protect me?" Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed deeply. "Yeah, I'll protect you. For now." She gave the smallest smile, fragile but real. The moment of peace did not last long. Outside, faint echoes of footsteps drifted through the ruins. The traders were still hunting. Ethan's hand moved to the knife at his belt. "They're not giving up," he muttered. Lyra closed her eyes again. She whispered softly, "They will not stop. Not until I am gone." Ethan cursed under his breath. He wanted answers, who she really was, what she was capable of, but there was no time. They had to survive first. He reached for his bag and began pulling out scraps of metal and wire. Lyra watched him curiously. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Setting traps," Ethan replied. "If they find us, I'll make them regret it." Her eyes glowed faintly, impressed despite her weakness. She whispered, "You fight." "For me?" He smirked without humor. "I've fought for less." For a moment, silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was heavy with something new. Connection. Ethan didn't want it. He didn't ask for it, but it was there, binding him to her. As he finished tying the last wire, he glanced at her again. She was drifting into sleep, but before her eyes closed, she whispered one last thing. "They will fear you too, when they see us together." Ethan frowned, the words chilling him. But he didn't ask what she meant. He simply pulled his knife free and sat by the door waiting. For the first time in years, he wasn't just protecting himself. He was protecting someone else, and deep inside he knew everything had just changed. The ruins around them were quiet, but Ethan's instincts told him it was only a thin cover. Danger breathed in the silence. He sat by the doorway of the broken building, knife in hand, eyes fixed on the darkness. Every shadow looked alive. Behind him, Lyra stirred. Her breathing was steadier now, though her skin still glowed faintly like starlight. When she opened her silver eyes, they carried a depth that unsettled him again. "They are close," she whispered. Ethan didn't look back at her. "I know, I can feel it too." "But how do you know?" "You're not just hearing footsteps, are you?" Her lips pressed together, as if she was deciding whether to speak. Then she said softly, "I hear mines." Ethan stiffened. "Mines?" Lyra nodded slowly. "They are loud. Full of hate, full of fear." "Fear of what?" Her small hands clutched his coat tightly. "Fear of me." Ethan turned, his eyes narrowing. "Why would they fear a child?" She held his gaze, and for the first time there was no weakness in her voice. "Only certainty. Because I am not only child. Because I carry secrets. Because I can break them without touching them." The weight of her words sank into Ethan like ice. He remembered how she had reached into him, pulling out memories of his wife without permission. If she could do that with him, what else could she do? "Is that why they left you in that sack?" Ethan asked, his voice low. She looked down, her silver hair falling across her face. "Yes, they said I was a mistake. Too much human. Too much danger. If I lived, I would change everything." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to believe she was just a lost girl, a victim of cruelty. But now the truth sounded darker. She wasn't just abandoned, she was hunted. Hunted because she was powerful. Before he could say anything, a noise outside broke the silence. Voices. Harsh, guttural alien words. The hunters were close. Ethan crouched lower, peering through a crack in the wall. A group of 6 traders moved through the street, their weapons glowing faintly blue. At their front walked a taller figure with sharper scales and brighter eyes. His voice carried authority. "Find the half-blood," the leader growled. "If she reaches the city, it will be war. She must die here." Ethan's blood ran cold. War? What could a single child bring that would start a war? He turned to Lyra. "What are they talking about?" Her silver eyes shimmered with tears. "Because I can reveal truth. Because I can show lies. If I live, their secrets die. They cannot hide." Ethan swallowed hard. It all began to make sense. She wasn't just dangerous, she was a threat to their power. If she could see into minds, she could expose every betrayal, every crime, every hidden plan. She was a living weapon. The aliens outside spread out, searching every corner. One of them kicked a broken door open, the crash echoing down the street. Ethan turned back to Lyra. His voice was sharp. "Listen, kid. If they catch you, it's over. Not just for you, for me too. So if you've got anything else you can do, you better tell me now." Her eyes closed. For a long moment she was silent. Then she whispered, "I can make them see their worst memory. Their darkest truth. But it hurts me." Ethan frowned. "Hurts you how?" She opened her eyes again, and this time he saw fear. Not of them, but of herself. "When I do it, I feel it too. I drown in their pain." Ethan cursed under his breath. A child forced to carry such a gift. Such a curse. The leader's voice roared outside. "Search everything." "She cannot escape." Ethan grabbed his bag and pulled Lyra to her feet. "Then we don't give them the chance." "Come on." They slipped out the back, moving through the rubble as quietly as ghosts. But the hunters were everywhere, their glowing eyes cutting through the dark. One of them spotted movement. He shouted, raising his weapon. A beam of blue fire shot past Ethan's head, scorching the wall. Ethan ran, dragging Lyra with him. "Faster!" They turned a corner, only to find 2 more traders waiting. Weapons raised. Ethan shoved Lyra behind him, knife in hand. He knew he couldn't win. 2 against 1 with energy rifles? It was suicide, but then Lyra stepped out from behind him. Her silver eyes glowed brighter than before. She lifted her small hands, trembling but steady. The traders froze. Their weapons dropped slightly. One of them gasped, his mouth twisting in horror. "No, not again. Not her." The other screamed, clutching his head. He fell to the ground, crying out words Ethan didn't understand. Lyra's body shook violently. Her eyes rolled back, but she kept standing. The air around them vibrated, heavy with unseen energy. Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "Stop, you'll kill yourself." Her lips parted. They see what they fear. The two traitors stumbled back, their faces pale. They turned and ran, their screams echoing in the ruins. Lyra collapsed into Ethan's arms. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow. Ethan held her tight, his heart pounding. He looked down at her pale face, then back toward the shadows where the others still searched. Now he understood why they wanted her dead. Why they feared her. She wasn't just a lost child. She was a weapon of truth, and truth could destroy them all. Ethan whispered to himself, his voice trembling. What have I agreed to protect? Outside, the leader's voice cut the night again, angrier than before. Find them. She cannot leave this district alive. Ethan tightened his grip on Lyra and pulled her closer. Whatever she was, whatever danger followed, he couldn't abandon her now. He had made his choice. And the cost was only beginning. The ruins shook with footsteps. The hunters were closing in, their voices sharp, their weapons glowing in the night. Ethan crouched in the corner of a crumbling warehouse, his knife in one hand, his bag of scraps in the other. Lyra lay beside him, pale and weak, her silver eyes half closed. But even now her head tilted slightly as if she could sense every enemy moving outside. They are many, she whispered. They come from all sides. Ethan gave a grim smile. Then we don't run anymore. She looked at him confused. No run? He shook his head. Running only buys time. Fighting gives us a chance. Her lips trembled. They will kill you. Ethan leaned closer, his eyes hard. Maybe, but I've got a few tricks left. And you've got something they fear more than death. Together we might just survive. He set to work quickly, pulling wires, shards of glass, and small charges from his bag. Years of scavenging had taught him how to make something deadly out of junk. He strung wires across doorways, set shards to catch the light, and rigged small explosives to old fuel cells. Lyra watched silently, her small hands clutching his coat. You fight. Like soldier. Not a soldier, Ethan muttered. Just a man who learned the hard way. The first alien hunter pushed into the warehouse, his glowing eyes scanning the dark. His foot caught the wire. The explosion was small but violent. Fire ripped through the doorway, throwing the alien back into the street. His scream echoed before silence swallowed it. The others roared in anger. Ethan crouched lower, his knife ready. That'll slow them down. Not stop them. Lyra's voice shook. I can help, but it hurts. Ethan glanced at her. She looked so fragile, so breakable, but her silver eyes glowed with determination. Only if you have to, he said. Don't burn yourself out. The second wave came fast. 3 hunters rushed inside, their rifles raised. Ethan threw a shard of glass, striking one in the eye. The alien screamed and dropped his weapon. Ethan leapt forward, knife flashing, cutting the second across the throat. The third aimed his rifle, but before he could fire, Lyra raised her hand. Her eyes blazed bright, and the hunter froze. His weapon shook, then dropped. He fell to his knees, screaming words that made no sense, as if he was trapped in a nightmare only he could see. Blood pounded in Ethan's ears. He grabbed Lyra's arm. Stop. You'll kill yourself. But she shook her head weakly. They must fear, or we die. More shadows moved at the entrance. The leader stepped inside now, his tall frame filling the doorway. His yellow eyes glowed brighter than the others, and his voice was like a blade. Half-blood, he hissed. You should never have lived. And you, human, you will die for protecting her. Ethan tightened his grip on his knife. You want her? You'll have to go through me. The leader laughed. You are nothing. A broken scavenger. Do you think you can stand against us? Ethan smirked, though his chest was tight with fear. Try me. The leader raised his weapon. A flash of blue light shot across the room. Ethan rolled aside just as the beam scorched the wall. He hurled another makeshift charge. It exploded near the leader's feet, throwing dust and debris into the air. The fight was chaos. Aliens stormed the warehouse, weapons blazing. Ethan fought like a cornered wolf, slashing, dodging, using every trap he had set. Explosions rattled the building, fire and smoke filling the air. Through it all, Lyra stood in the center, her small body trembling, her eyes glowing brighter and brighter. Every time a hunter raised his weapon, she reached into his mind. Some dropped their guns and fled. Others fell to the ground, clawing at their own faces, trapped in visions only they could see. But each time she used her power, she grew weaker. Her skin turned pale as paper, her breath shallow. Ethan saw it, but there was no stopping. It was fight or die. Finally, only the leader remained. His scales were scorched, his weapon broken, but his eyes burned with fury. He lunged at Ethan, claws flashing. Ethan blocked with his knife, but the alien's strength was overwhelming. The blade clattered to the ground. The leader's claw raked across Ethan's chest, drawing blood. Ethan fell back, gasping. The leader raised his claw for the final strike. But then Lyra screamed. It was not a cry of fear, it was a cry of power. Her eyes blazed like twin stars, her whole body glowing with light. The leader froze, his body shaking violently. His eyes widened in horror. No, not that, anything but that. His words turned into a scream. He stumbled back, clutching his head, his voice cracking with terror, and then he collapsed, silent and still. Lyra fell to her knees, the light fading from her body. Ethan crawled to her, pulling her into his arms. She was burning hot, her skin trembling with exhaustion. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice rough. "Stay with me." Her eyes opened weakly. "I showed him what he truly is. He could not survive it." Ethan held her tight, his heart pounding. Around them, the warehouse lay in ruins, filled with smoke and broken bodies. They had survived, for now. But Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. If this many had come for her, more would follow. She wasn't just a child. She wasn't just half human. She was something far greater. Something dangerous enough to shake the stars. And now she was his responsibility. Smoke drifted through the ruins of the warehouse. The air was heavy with the stench of fire and scorched metal. Bodies of the fallen hunters lay scattered across the floor, their weapons silent, their glowing eyes dark. Ethan leaned against the cracked wall, his chest bleeding, his breath rough. His knife was gone, his traps destroyed, but somehow he was still alive. In his arms lay Lyra. She was pale and trembling, her glow faint now, like the last light of a dying star. Ethan pulled his coat tighter around her small body, trying to shield her from the cold. "You did it," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, filled with both pride and fear. "You stopped them." Her silver eyes flickered open, heavy with exhaustion. "No, not stopped. More will come." Ethan's jaw tightened. She was right. The fight tonight was only the beginning. The ones they killed were hunters, but above them stood commanders, rulers, and powers that would never let a child like her live. He glanced at the fallen leader. Even in death, the alien's face was twisted with terror. Whatever Lyra had shown him in his mind, it had destroyed him completely. Ethan shivered, remembering the way she had glowed, her scream tearing through the air like a storm. "You scared me too, kid," he muttered softly. Lyra's weak hand gripped his sleeve. "Did not mean to. I only wanted to protect you." Ethan stared at her, his chest aching. This child, hunted by her own kind, broken and alone, had still chosen to protect him. He could not walk away now. He stood slowly, lifting her into his arms. His body screamed in pain, but he ignored it. Step by step, he carried her out of the ruined warehouse into the cool night air. The city beyond was silent, but not safe. Lights glimmered in the distance, and Ethan knew eyes would soon be watching again. As they moved through the broken streets, Lyra spoke softly, her voice drifting like a whisper in the wind. "They hate me because I'm not pure. Because I carry human blood. But I don't understand. How can I?" Ethan frowned. "Human blood? What do you mean?" She rested her head against his chest. "Long ago there were tests, experiments. They mixed human and alien. Most died. I did not. I was born different. Half of two worlds." Ethan's stomach turned. Experiments, tests. The thought made his blood boil. Humans had once been scattered across the galaxy, some enslaved, some forgotten. To think that someone had used them in experiments. He clenched his teeth. "And your human side? That's why you speak our words. That's why you called me Mom." Her eyes shimmered faintly. "Yes, but more than that. I see you. I feel your pain. You lost someone. I felt it when I touched you. I thought maybe I could fill that empty place." Even for a moment, Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she could never replace the woman he lost. But when he looked at her, so small, so fragile, so full of hope, he couldn't say the words. Instead, he whispered, "You don't replace her, kid. But maybe you give me a reason to keep going." For the first time, a real smile touched her lips. Weak, but pure. They walked in silence until they reached the edge of the city ruins. Beyond stretched the wasteland, Miles of barren rock under a sky full of stars. Somewhere out there, ships would come. More hunters. More danger. Ethan set Lyra down gently on a broken stone, crouching in front of her. Listen, Lyra, from here on it won't get easier. They'll keep coming. They'll never stop. Protecting you will mean running, hiding, fighting every step. Her silver eyes met his. And you? Will leave me? He shook his head firmly. No, I don't walk away. Not anymore. Her small hand reached for his again. Then, I am not alone. Before Ethan could answer, a sharp sound cut through the night, a low hum growing louder. He looked up. In the sky, lights shimmered. Not stars, ships. A fleet was arriving. Ethan's blood ran cold. Damn it. They're already here. Lyra's gaze stayed fixed on the ships, her voice calm, almost certain. They know now. They know I live. Ethan pulled his knife from the ground where it had fallen earlier and strapped it to his belt. His body ached, his wounds burned, but his spirit hardened. Then we make them regret it, he said. Lyra stood shakily beside him, her glow faint but steady. She whispered, They will fear us. Together. Ethan glanced down at her, a mix of pride and dread in his chest. This child wasn't just a burden. She wasn't just someone to protect. She was the spark of something far bigger, something that could ignite war or change the galaxy forever. As the ships descended, their lights flooding the ruins, Lyra gripped his hand tightly. Her voice was small, but her words were clear. They said, You would come for me, Mom. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't correct her this time. He only held her hand tighter as the night sky roared with engines. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And in the shadows of the galaxy, whispers would soon spread. A human and a half-blood child had survived when they should have died. The story had only just begun.